Hello, everyone. Okay, here we go. Let's get started. The image you see here is Journeyman's cover of Hannah Carlin's upcoming adventure, Masquerade of Lulf. I hope I got that right, Hannah. This is one of Journeyman's best works, and he tells me that from what he's read of Hannah's adventure, that it's one of her best works too. So I'm really looking forward to this awesome cover on an awesome adventure. But now let me talk about the title of this stream, which is Robert Bolaño's writing advice. He was a Chilean writer, died much too young, probably most famous for The Savage Detectives. And he wrote a piece of writing advice in 12 parts. Most of it was just his personal prejudice / considered opinion. You know, read these writers, but not these writers, dress like this writer, so on. A little bit of humor thrown in too. But he gave a piece of writing advice that I initially dismissed because I thought it was honestly ridiculous. Okay? But I've made some changes in my life. I'm eating a different diet. I feel a lot of energy. So now his writing advice makes a hell of a lot of sense to me. And here's the piece of advice. He says it is best to write short stories 3 or 5 at a time. If one has energy, write them 9 or 15 at a time. Sounds kind of crazy, doesn't it? 3 to 15 short stories at a time. By the way, he also says 2 at a time is bad. So how does one do that? You know, well, I'm not going to try for 15 short stories immediately. Also, I want to write things besides short stories. But the basic idea is having multiple projects at a time keeps you from going stale, getting stuck with one project. You know, there's a lot to be said for it. And if you keep making progress on all of them, then that's good. So here are my upcoming projects. The first one is a post-apocalyptic Star Trek game. This is just a homebrew role-playing campaign. I'm writing the rules up in GURPS, and my friend Travis is going to run the game. Since it's somebody else's intellectual property and too tied into the continuity of it, I'll never be able to publish it. But it's a pretty cool idea. So here, if you want to hear it, here goes. And even if you don't want to hear it, stick around. It's good. The idea is that at the end of Voyager, if you saw that series, Janeway deals a terrible blow to the Borg, destroying their interstellar highway and killing lots of Borg. Okay? But she doesn't kill all of them, and the Borg know how to build those highways. They're not dumb, so they can build it again. And so then I thought, what would be the response of the Borg to such an event? And I thought they would rebuild, and then I thought they'd want to wipe out the Alpha Quadrant, all the humans or human types in it, because they don't want to be threatened like that again. So my idea is that sometime after Voyager returns, the Borg come en masse. You know, not just one cube, a whole bunch of cubes. But this is post-apocalyptic. Well, that's the apocalypse. A whole bunch of Borg cubes come in and start wiping everything out. But the Alpha Quadrant is full of clever, resourceful space empires. The Federation, Klingons, Romulans, Cardassians. Did I miss anybody? So what happens is that is that the Alpha Quadrant wins. And they make sure that the Borg never come back. You know, that genocide that Picard that Picard avoided in Next Generation, this time the Alpha Quadrant embraces it because they don't want to experience that kind of devastation again. But it's a Pyrrhic victory for the empires of the Alpha Quadrant, because they had to strain their resources so much to defeat the Borg that that it's impossible, that they don't have that magical Star Trek economy anymore. That economy that lets them produce as much food and other materials as they want. That they've run out of they're running low on dilithium crystals or whatever it is that powers their economy. And so now things are scarce. Planets and planetary systems are scarred. If you remember, Trek fans, there's an episode of Star Trek Next Gen, and this keeps on being mentioned on at least on Next Gen, that if you go at warp too fast, too often in an area, you're going to create like areas of instability. Well, in the war against the Borg, all those speed limits were thrown out. And now, again, the races of the Alpha Quadrant are dealing with the consequences of that. You know, they've warped space so much that they've created a lot of interstellar instability. And so that's not good either. And since they're running low on resources, they can't field ships everywhere they want. They can't protect their planets like they used to from raiders and other empires. They can't provide the resources to those other planets. And so a lot of stuff that was bubbling under the surface, you know, starts coming to the surface. You have factions which were at one time placated by the near infinite resources of these empires, or subjugated by those same resources. Well, now these factions are popping up again. You know, the Maquis rise again in the Federation. Section 31, you know, becomes more powerful. And so that's the premise of it. It's a resource-starved Star Trek game. Our crew is going to begin with a you know, like just having fought a battle and looking for anywhere that they can lick their wounds and make some kind of repairs to their ships. You know, they'd love to go back to an actual Federation space station and dock somewhere and get repaired, bada bang, bada boom, like in the old days. But that's not easy. That's not easy anymore. So that's the game. Okay. So that's my first project, and I really got to get that turned around real quick. I'm about halfway done with it. My second project is one you're already familiar with, which is Veneer, the Book of Mass. I've got to continue to write stories for that. Okay. My third project is a short story for the Writers of the Future contest. That's L. Ron Hubbard's Writers of the Future contest, and it is one of the best contests you can enter. It costs $0, so you don't have to spend a single dime to enter it. And as long as it's a piece of fancy sci-fi or horror, and it's not too explicit, it'll be considered. You know, if you're one of the 12, let's see, I believe there's 4 judging periods each year. If you're one of the, if you place, that is, if you get first, second, or third, in one of those 4 periods, you get published, you win some money, and you get invited to go to a to go to a like ceremony / workshop, which is really cool. That's a prize I really want. Let's see. My next project is to write a literary short story. I've got like a half a dozen literary magazines scoped out, and I want to write a story that I can publish in a literary magazine. This is different than writing a fantasy, sci-fi, or horror story, mostly because literary magazines are kind of snobby about that. Not all of them, but some of them. But still, I want to get published in something like the Virginia Quarterly or Atlantic or the New Yorker. Yeah, I know I'm aiming high, but that is what I want to do. You know, they also pay well, you know, which doesn't hurt. And then I want to write my novel, Post-Human Condition, which I'll tell you more about at another time. But it's set in the world of the post-human condition. And let me talk about that a little bit more, because that makes up my next project, which is the Post-Human Condition RPG. And so the Post-Human Condition is the setting for the Burlap Daughter. If you've followed that a little bit, maybe you followed Journey's stream and you've seen the paintings he's done for that. And the premise of the Post-Human Condition is that alien gods come to Earth, and their mere presence changes us and disrupts our society, but it doesn't destroy it. And our worship of them changes them as well. So in a way, it's sort of Lovecraftian, but instead of, well, basically, if Lovecraft's gods came to Earth, the human race would be extinct. So unlike Lovecraft, I'm focusing on the weirdness of the gods instead of the horror of the gods. And so the RPG will be about the adventurers in this new world, because one of the things that gods have done is that their mere presence fractures space and time, but our presence, our minds, keep things together. So the way that works is that there are multiple realities, and we can travel between them. They share a lot of things in common, so there's a lot of what you would call thin spots, where you can travel from one to another. And some people might just do that naturally. Let's see. The other effect this has is that it makes electronic equipment and any kind of intellectual storage, like even a book, less reliable unless you have people looking at it. So libraries require librarians and scholars, simply so that our human minds can exert our little bit of influence and keep these libraries together, or keep the data on a chip from being corrupted by the presence of the gods. And so this will allow for adventures along the lines of some of the stuff you might see in Shadowrun, which don't quite make as much sense anymore, because like think of like a story like Johnny Mnemonic. Is it really that necessary anymore? To download stuff into your brain? Well, when the attention of humans becomes important to maintaining the data, then yeah, that is important. And of course, all this warping of reality wouldn't be complete without wizards, or scientists. And they've kind of merged a little bit. So those are my projects, and how am I going to work on them? Thanks to my new diet, I've got a lot of energy. I'm better able to concentrate. So some things, like when a deadline's coming, like with this Star Trek game, I'm just going to buckle down and do it. But when I don't have an immediate deadline, I'm going to work on these things in sequence. Well, that's not quite right. I'm going to work on them as I feel like it. I'm going to, when I get stuck in one, I'm going to move to another. I think that's why Bolaño gave that advice. You know, if one story doesn't make sense, if one story is troubling you, move on to another one, come back to that story another day. You know, and so now I am going to, in each story, I am going to work in a sequential manner, you know, starting with an outline, flushing things out, and so on. But multiple projects will allow me to avoid getting stuck, to avoid getting bored, you know, that kind of thing. And that is my plan. So we'll see how this all goes. Yeah, and that's about it. I'm pretty excited. I'll let you know about my progress the next time I broadcast. Thanks, everybody. Bye.